The streets of Los Angeles were freezing that December evening. Most people don't think of LA as a cold city, but when you're sleeping outside with nothing but a thin blanket and some cardboard, every night feels like winter. David had been living on these streets for almost 9 months now, and he still wasn't used to it. He never imagined his life would end up this way. Just 2 years ago, David had a normal life. He worked in construction, had a small apartment in the valley, and even managed to save a little money each month. He wasn't rich, but he was doing okay. Then everything fell apart faster than he could have imagined. A bad fall at a construction site left him with an injured back. The medical bills started piling up. His insurance didn't cover everything, and before he knew it, he was drowning in debt. When he couldn't work anymore, he couldn't pay rent. And just like that, at 52 years old, David found himself on the street. That evening, he was sitting against the cold brick wall of a closed bookstore on Sunset Boulevard. His cardboard sign was leaning next to him, but he wasn't really holding it up anymore. After months of asking strangers for help, the rejection starts to wear you down. Most people walked past without even looking at him. He understood. He used to do the same thing before all this happened to him. It's easier to pretend homeless people are invisible than to face the uncomfortable reality that anyone could end up in their shoes. The Christmas lights were starting to come on in all the store windows. Families walked by with shopping bags, laughing and planning their holiday dinners. David tried not to think about it too much. Feeling sorry for yourself doesn't help when you're in this situation. You just have to focus on surviving one day at a time. Today had been particularly rough. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, and his stomach was starting to hurt from the emptiness. That's when he saw him. A man walking alone down the street, dressed in jeans and an old leather jacket. There was something familiar about him, but David's mind was foggy from hunger. Then it clicked. That was Keanu Reeves, the actor. David had seen him in plenty of movies over the years. The Matrix, John Wick, all those action films. But here he was, just walking down the street like a regular person. No bodyguards or fancy cars or anything like that. David's first instinct was to leave him alone. Famous people probably get bothered all the time, and the last thing he wanted was to be another annoying person asking for something. But his stomach growled again, reminding him that pride doesn't fill an empty belly. He took a deep breath and stood up, his joints aching from sitting in the cold for so long. "Excuse me, sir," David called out, his voice scratchy and weak. The man stopped and turned around. David shuffled closer, suddenly very aware of how he must look and smell. "I'm sorry to bother you, but could you spare $1? Anything would help." What happened next surprised David completely. Instead of the usual response where people either ignore you, give you a quick dollar and rush away, or worse, tell you to get a job, Keanu stopped fully. He actually looked at David. Really looked at him right in the eyes, and then he smiled. Not a fake celebrity smile or a pitying look, but a genuine warm smile like they were old friends running into each other. "Hey man," Keanu said, and his voice was kind. "When was the last time you ate something?" David wasn't expecting that question. Most people don't ask homeless people questions. They treat you like you're not quite human anymore. David stammered, trying to remember. 2 days ago, I think. Got some food at the shelter, but I missed it yesterday." Keanu nodded slowly, like he was really taking that in. "You hungry right now?" "Yes, sir, I am," David admitted. There was no point in lying. "Come on, then," Keanu said, gesturing down the street. "There's a diner just a couple blocks from here. Let me buy you some dinner." David stood there frozen for a moment, not sure if he heard that right. "You want to buy me dinner?" "Yeah, of course," Keanu said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Come on, I'm actually hungry myself." As they started walking together down the sidewalk, David couldn't quite believe what was happening. This famous actor, this millionaire who could be anywhere in the world, was walking next to him. A homeless guy who probably smelled terrible, and Keanu wasn't walking fast trying to get it over with. He was just walking normal, like they were two regular people going to grab a bite. David felt incredibly self-conscious. He could see people on the street staring at them, probably wondering why Keanu Reeves was with someone who looked like David. His clothes were dirty and torn. He hadn't had a proper shower in weeks. His hair was long and messy, and his beard was scraggly. He probably looked exactly like what he was, a guy living on the streets. But if Keanu noticed or cared about any of that, he didn't show it. He held the door open when they got to the diner. a small place called Jerry's that David had walked past 100 times but never been able to afford. The warm air inside felt amazing after the cold street. A waitress looked up and her eyes went wide when she recognized Keanu, but he just gave her a friendly nod and headed to a booth in the back corner. David slid into the seat across from him, the vinyl cushion feeling like luxury compared to sitting on concrete. His hands were shaking a little, partly from hunger and partly from the surreal nature of the whole situation. The waitress brought over menus and water, stealing glances at Keanu but trying to play it cool. "Order whatever you want," Keanu said, pushing a menu toward David. "Seriously, anything. Get an appetizer, get dessert, whatever sounds good." David looked at the menu and his eyes blurred with tears for a second. He quickly wiped them away, embarrassed. It had been so long since anyone had shown him this kind of simple kindness. Not pity, not charity given from a distance, but actual human kindness. Being treated like a person again, like someone whose hunger and comfort mattered. "Thank you," David managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea what this means." Keanu just smiled and picked up his own menu. "We all need help sometimes, man. There's no shame in that." And in that moment, sitting in that warm diner with the smell of coffee and burgers in the air, David felt something he hadn't felt in months. He felt hope. The waitress came back with water and a pot of coffee. David's hands wrapped around the warm mug like it was the most precious thing in the world. He couldn't remember the last time he'd had hot coffee that wasn't from a gas station dumpster or watered down at a shelter. The warmth spread through his fingers and up his arms, and for a moment he just sat there enjoying that simple pleasure. Keanu ordered a burger and fries, nothing fancy, just regular food. David did the same, though his eyes had lingered on the steak dinner for a moment before guilt pulled them away. He didn't want to take advantage of this man's kindness. The burger would be more than enough, more than he'd had in a long time. "So," Keanu said, leaning back in the booth, completely relaxed, "what's your story? How'd you end up out here?" Most people don't ask. They either assume they know your story or they don't want to know because it makes you too real. But Keanu was asking like he genuinely wanted to understand. Not in a nosy way, but in a way that made David feel like his story actually mattered. David took a sip of coffee, gathering his thoughts. "I was a construction worker," he started, his voice quiet. "Did it for almost 30 years. I was good at it too. Started as a laborer, worked my way up to foreman on some projects. Nothing glamorous, but it was honest work and it paid the bills." Keanu nodded, listening carefully. He wasn't looking at his phone or glancing around the restaurant. His attention was completely focused on David, which felt strange and wonderful at the same time. "About a year and a half ago, I took a bad fall at a job site," David continued. 3-story building scaffolding gave way. I fell and messed up my back pretty bad. Could have been worse, I guess. Could have died. But the injury left me unable to work for months. Workers' comp covered some of it, but not everything. Medical bills started piling up fast. The memories were painful. But somehow talking about it to someone who was really listening made it a little easier. My insurance had all these gaps in coverage that I didn't even know about until I needed it. Physical therapy, medication, specialist visits, thousands and thousands of dollars. I used up all my savings in the first few months. Then I started falling behind on rent. David paused as the waitress brought their food. The burger looked incredible, thick and juicy with melted cheese and fresh vegetables. His stomach growled loudly, embarrassingly loud, but Keanu just smiled and picked up his own burger. "Go ahead, eat," Keanu said. "Don't let it get cold." David took a bite, and it was honestly one of the best things he'd ever tasted. Maybe it was just because he was so hungry, or maybe it was because of everything this meal represented. But he had to stop himself from crying right there. He chewed slowly, savoring every bite. Between mouthfuls, he continued his story. "My landlord was patient at first, but after 3 months of missed rent, he had to evict me. I get it, he had bills too. I tried staying with a friend for a while, but that only lasted a few weeks. He had his own family and problems. I didn't want to be a burden. By the time my back healed enough to work again, I'd already lost everything. No apartment, no address, no way to clean up for job interviews. You'd be surprised how hard it is to get a job when you don't have a place to shower or clean clothes to wear. Construction companies want reliable guys who show up on time and ready to work. Hard to do that when you're sleeping under a bridge." Keanu listened to every word, occasionally nodding or asking a question. There was no judgment in his eyes, no pity, just understanding. "That's rough, man," he said quietly. "The system really fails people sometimes. You work hard your whole life, one bad thing happens, and suddenly you're on your own." "Exactly," David said, feeling understood for the first time in forever. "That's exactly it. I never thought it would happen to me. I always thought homeless people must have done something to deserve it, you know? Drugs or bad choices or whatever. But now I know different. Sometimes you just fall through the cracks, and once you're down there, it's almost impossible to climb back out." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. David couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this normal. Just two guys having dinner and talking, not a rich celebrity and a homeless guy. Just two human beings sharing a meal. "Can I tell you something?" Keanu said, setting down his burger. "I've had some hard times too. Different from yours, but hard in their own way. Lost people I loved. Struggled for years trying to make it as an actor. Sleeping in my car sometimes, wondering if I'd ever catch a break. Had moments where I didn't know how I'd pay my rent." David looked up, surprised. You don't think of famous actors having those kinds of problems. But Keanu's face was serious, honest. "I'm not comparing my situation to yours," Keanu continued. "But I learned something from those times. I learned that we're all just people trying to get by. Some of us get lucky, some don't. And the difference between being okay and being on the street can be smaller than people think. Could be one bad accident, one illness, one piece of bad luck." He took a sip of his coffee. "I also learned that kindness matters. That helping each other matters. When I was struggling, people helped me. Gave me a couch to sleep on. Bought me meals. Believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And I promised myself that if I ever made it, if I ever got to a place where I had more than I needed, I'd do the same for others." David felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just charity. This was one person who understood struggle reaching out to another. "Most people look right through me now," David said softly. "Like I'm invisible. Or worse, like I'm dangerous or dirty. You're the first person in months who's treated me like a regular human being." "That's because you are a regular human being," Keanu said firmly. "You're just going through a hard time. That doesn't make you less than anyone else. Doesn't make you invisible. You're still you, same guy who worked construction for 30 years, same guy who has a story and dreams and deserves respect." The words hit David hard. He'd started to forget that about himself. Started to believe that maybe he was what people saw. Just another homeless guy on the street. But Keanu's words reminded him that he was still David. Still the same person he'd always been. Just in a terrible situation. They finished their meals, and Keanu ordered coffee and pie for both of them. As they ate dessert, they talked about easier things. Movies, sports, life in LA. Keanu told funny stories about filming mishaps, and David shared memories from his construction days. For an hour, David forgot about the cold street waiting for him outside. He forgot about being homeless. He was just a guy having dinner with another guy, laughing and talking like normal people do. And that simple gift of normalcy, of being treated like he mattered, was worth more than any amount of money could buy. As they finished their pie and coffee, David felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the food. For the first time in months, he felt human again. Not like a problem to be solved or a person to be avoided, but just human. It was a feeling he'd taken for granted his whole life until it was gone. The waitress brought the check and Keanu pulled out his wallet without even looking at the total. He left cash on the table, including what looked like a very generous tip. David noticed the waitress's eyes light up when she came to collect it. That was something else he'd noticed about Keanu during their dinner. He treated everyone with the same kindness and respect, from David to the waitress to the cook who'd waved from the kitchen window. "Listen," Keanu said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "I want to help you, but I don't want this to just be a good meal and then you're back where you started. That doesn't really solve anything." David nodded, unsure where this was going. Part of him was just grateful for the dinner. He hadn't expected anything more. Keanu reached into his wallet again and pulled out several bills. David's eyes widened when he realized they were $100 bills. 5 of them, $500 just sitting there on the table between them. "I can't take that," David said automatically, even though every practical part of his brain was screaming at him to take it. "That's too much." The dinner was already more than enough. "Hold on," Keanu said, holding up his hand. "This isn't a handout." "Well, it is, but it's more than that. Let me explain what I'm thinking." He pushed the money closer to David. Here's the deal. This money is for you to get cleaned up, get some decent clothes, and get back on your feet. There's a motel about 6 blocks from here, the Blue Star. Tell them I sent you and they'll give you a room for a week. That should give you time to shower, wash your clothes, and rest properly. David stared at the money, his hands trembling. It felt like a dream. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything yet, I'm not done, Keanu said with a slight smile. He pulled out a business card from his wallet and placed it next to the money. This is my friend Robert. He owns a construction company here in LA. I'm going to call him tonight and tell him about you. If you show up at his office tomorrow at 10 in the morning, clean and ready to work, he'll give you a job. It won't be glamorous at first, probably demolition and cleanup, but it's honest work and it pays decent. David picked up the card with shaking hands. The name Robert Chen was printed on it, along with an address in Burbank. You'd do that for me? Just like that? I'm doing it because I believe everyone deserves a second chance, Keanu said. But here's the thing, man. I can give you money, I can give you an opportunity, but I can't do the hard part for you. You have to show up. You have to do the work. You have to want to change your situation. He leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. I've known people who got help and wasted it because they weren't really ready to change. And I've known people who took the smallest opportunity and turned their whole life around. The difference wasn't luck or talent or anything like that. It was choice. They chose to fight for themselves. David felt tears running down his face and he didn't even try to hide them anymore. I want to fight, he said, his voice breaking. I'm so tired of living like this. I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of feeling worthless. I just need a chance. Just one real chance. Then this is your chance, Keanu said simply. Take the money. Get yourself together. Show up tomorrow, and then work harder than you've ever worked before. Can you do that? Yes, David said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. Yes, I can do that. I swear I won't let you down. Keanu smiled and stood up from the booth. You're not doing this for me. You're doing it for yourself. That's important to remember. This is about you taking control of your life again. They walked out of the diner together into the cold December night. The streets were still busy with holiday shoppers, but everything looked different to David now. The world that had seemed so dark and hopeless an hour ago suddenly had possibility in it again. Outside the diner, Keanu turned to face him. One more thing, he said. When you get back on your feet, and I believe you will, I want you to remember how this feels. Remember what it's like to need help and have someone give it to you. And then, when you're able, do the same for someone else. That's how we make the world better. One person helping another. David nodded, unable to speak through the emotion clogging his throat. He wanted to hug this man, this stranger who'd shown him more kindness in 2 hours than he'd experienced in 9 months. But he also didn't want to overstep, didn't want to make things awkward. Keanu solved the problem by pulling him into a quick hug, patting his back. You got this, man. I believe in you. Then he was gone, walking down the street and disappearing into the crowd of people. David stood there on the sidewalk, clutching the money and the business card, watching until Keanu was completely out of sight. He half expected to wake up and find it was all a dream, some cruel fantasy his hungry mind had created. But the money in his hand was real. The business card was real. The warm feeling in his stomach from the first real meal he'd had in days was real. This was actually happening. David looked at the $500 bills, more money than he'd held in his hands in over a year. He could feel the weight of the choice ahead of him. He could take this money and spend it on other things. He could make excuses tomorrow about why he didn't show up to Robert's office. He could let fear or doubt or the comfortable misery of his current situation keep him from trying. Or he could do exactly what Keanu suggested. Get clean, get ready, show up, and fight like hell to get his life back. It wasn't even a choice, not really. This was the lifeline he'd been praying for. The universe, or God, or just random luck had put Keanu Reeves in his path tonight. And that man had offered him a way out. A real, genuine way out of the nightmare his life had become. David wiped his eyes and started walking toward the Blue Star Motel. His legs felt stronger than they had in months. His spine seemed straighter. With each step he felt a little more like his old self. The man he'd been before the world had beaten him down. Tomorrow would be the first day of the rest of his life. But tonight he would sleep in a real bed, under a real roof, knowing that someone out there believed he was worth saving. And that belief, that simple faith from a stranger, was going to change everything. David didn't sleep much that night, but not because the motel bed was uncomfortable. Actually, it was the most comfortable place he'd slept in 9 months. The sheets were clean, the pillow was soft, and there was a real roof over his head instead of cardboard and sky. He couldn't sleep because his mind was racing with thoughts about tomorrow. What if he messed this up? What if he showed up and Robert decided he wasn't worth hiring? What if this was all some kind of misunderstanding? The fears circled his mind like vultures, trying to pick apart the hope that had been building in his chest since dinner. Around 3 in the morning, David got up and stood in front of the bathroom mirror. The fluorescent light was harsh and unforgiving. He looked at himself, really looked for the first time in months. He'd been avoiding mirrors, avoiding seeing what he'd become, but now he needed to see. The man staring back at him looked rough. His hair was long and tangled, gray mixed with the brown he remembered. His beard was scraggly and unkempt. His face was weathered and lined, making him look older than his 52 years. His eyes looked tired, haunted even. But underneath all of that, he could still see himself. David was still in there somewhere. He turned on the shower and stepped under the hot water. It felt like heaven. He stood there for a long time, letting the water wash away months of street dirt and shame and hopelessness. He used the little bottle of motel shampoo 3 times, scrubbing his hair and beard until they were actually clean. He used the bar of soap until it was practically gone, washing every inch of his body. When he finally stepped out and wiped the fog off the mirror, he looked more human already. Still rough, still in need of a haircut and proper grooming, but cleaner, more like a person who could walk into an office and ask for a job. He washed his clothes in the sink using more of the soap, then hung them to dry on the shower curtain rod. They were still his old street clothes, stained and worn, but at least they'd be clean. Tomorrow he'd use some of the money to buy something better. Tonight he just needed to be clean. David finally fell asleep around 5 in the morning and woke up at 7:30, his internal clock still set to street time where you need to be awake early to stay safe. He got up immediately, his stomach full of butterflies. This was it. This was the day that would determine whether he could actually claw his way back to a normal life. His clothes were still damp, but wearable. He put them on and looked at himself one more time in the mirror. He looked like a homeless guy who'd taken a shower, which is exactly what he was, but that would have to do for today. If he got the job, if Robert actually hired him, then he could afford better clothes. One step at a time. The address on the business card was in Burbank, about 45 minutes away by bus. David had enough change for bus fare, though he was careful not to break any of the $100 bills yet. He wanted to prove to himself that he could make it to this appointment using his own resources, that he wasn't completely helpless. He arrived at the construction company office at 9:30, half an hour early. The building was a simple warehouse with an attached office, the kind of place David had visited hundreds of times in his construction days. He could hear the sounds of work happening inside, tools and voices and the beep of machinery backing up. The familiar sounds made his heart ache with longing. He'd missed this world so much. David sat on a bench outside watching workers come and go, trying to calm his nerves. Some of them glanced at him curiously. He probably looked out of place, a rough-looking guy sitting by himself, clearly nervous. But no one said anything. At exactly 10 o'clock, David walked through the office door. A woman at the front desk looked up and smiled professionally. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Robert Chen," David said, his voice shakier than he wanted it to be.
"My name is David. Keanu Reeves said he'd call about me?"
The woman's eyebrows went up slightly and she picked up her phone. "Let me check." She spoke quietly into the receiver, then hung up and smiled at him warmly. "He's expecting you. Go ahead through that door and down the hall. Last office on the right." David's heart was pounding as he walked down the hallway. The walls were covered with photos of completed projects, permits, and safety awards. This was a real professional operation. What if they took one look at him and changed their minds? Robert Chen's office door was open. He was a man in his late 40s wearing jeans and a company polo shirt, with blueprints spread across his desk. He looked up when David appeared in the doorway and immediately stood up with a smile. "David?" he asked, extending his hand. Come in, come in." David shook his hand, trying not to grip too hard or too soft, trying to seem normal and confident even though he was terrified. "Thank you for seeing me, sir." "Please, sit down," Robert said, gesturing to a chair. "Keanu called me last night. Told me a little bit about your situation. Said you were a construction worker who hit a rough patch. Yes, sir, David said. I worked construction for almost 30 years. Started as a laborer, worked my way up to foreman. I know my way around a job site. Robert nodded, studying him. David could see him taking in the worn clothes, the rough appearance, but there was no judgment in his eyes. Just assessment. Keanu told me you're ready to work hard, that you want a real chance to get back on your feet. Is that true? More than anything, David said, and he meant it with everything in him. I know I don't look like much right now, sir. I know I'm coming to you from the streets. But I'm a good worker. I'm reliable, I'm skilled, and I'm desperate for the opportunity to prove myself. I won't let you down. Robert leaned back in his chair. You know what I told Keanu last night? I told him I've hired a lot of guys over the years, and some of the best workers I ever had were people who were fighting their way back from something. They work harder because they know what it's like to have nothing. They appreciate the opportunity more. He pulled out a piece of paper from his desk drawer. This is an application. I need you to fill it out, and I need to be honest with you about what I can offer. The job is demolition and site cleanup to start. It's hard work, physical work. The pay is $18 an hour, which isn't great, but it's honest. You'd be starting Monday, assuming everything checks out. David felt like he might cry right there in the office. $18 an hour, 40 hours a week. That was over $700 a week before taxes. After months of having nothing, that sounded like a fortune. Monday? David repeated. You mean I have the job? If you want it, Robert said. But I need to be clear about my expectations. You show up on time every day. You work hard. You follow safety rules. You treat everyone with respect. And if you're struggling with anything, housing or whatever, you come talk to me. We've got resources and connections to help. But you have to show up and do the work, deal? David stood up and extended his hand again, his eyes wet with tears he couldn't hold back anymore. Deal, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. You won't regret this. Robert shook his hand firmly. I don't think I will. Now fill out that application and we'll get you set up for Monday morning. As David sat down to fill out the paperwork, his hands were trembling so badly he could barely hold the pen. But they were good trembles, the kind that come from relief and hope and the overwhelming feeling that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. 6 months had passed since that December night when David's life changed forever. 6 months of hard work, early mornings and slow but steady progress. 6 months of rebuilding not just construction sites but his own life. The first few weeks had been the hardest. David's body wasn't used to the physical labor anymore after months on the streets. Every muscle ached. His hands blistered and bled. He'd come home to the small room he was renting, barely able to move, wondering if he could do it all again the next day. But he did. Every single day he showed up. Robert had been true to his word. The work was hard, but it was fair. David started with demolition, tearing down walls and hauling debris. It wasn't glamorous, but he didn't care. He was working. He was earning money. He had a purpose again. By the second month, David had saved enough for a small studio apartment. It wasn't much, just one room with a tiny kitchen and bathroom, but it was his. He had a key. He had an address. He had a place where he could close the door and be safe. The first night he slept there, he cried like a baby. Robert noticed David's work ethic and started giving him more responsibility. By month 3, David was back doing carpentry, the work he'd always loved. His hands remembered the skills even if they were rusty at first. By month 4, he was helping train new guys on the crew. By month 5, Robert had promoted him to assistant foreman on smaller projects. Now 6 months later, David stood in his apartment getting ready for work, and he barely recognized his own life. He had clean clothes hanging in a closet. He had food in his refrigerator. He had money in a bank account. Small things, normal things, things that most people took for granted. But to David, they were miracles. He'd tried several times to reach out to Keanu to thank him properly, to tell him how much that night had meant. But the actor was filming somewhere overseas, and David's messages went unanswered. He understood. Keanu had moved on, probably helped other people, probably didn't need or want thanks. He'd done what he'd set out to do, which was give David a chance. The rest had been up to David. That morning was a Saturday, David's day off. He usually spent his free time resting or running errands, but today he had different plans. He'd been thinking about something Keanu had said that night, about remembering how it felt to need help and then helping others when you could. David walked down to the convenience store on the corner, the same route he took to catch his bus to work. He'd walked this path hundreds of times now, and every time he passed the same spot where a young woman often sat with a cardboard sign. She looked to be in her late 20s, thin and tired, with a baby in a stroller beside her. He'd given her a few dollars here and there over the past months, whenever he had cash in his pocket. But today he wanted to do more. He stopped in front of her and she looked up with the same wary, hopeful expression he remembered having on his own face. "Hey," David said gently, crouching down to her level. "I'm David, what's your name?" "Amy," she said quietly, holding her baby closer protectively. "When did you last have a real meal, Amy?" David asked. The question seemed to surprise her. "Yesterday, I think. The shelter had soup. You hungry now?" David asked, even though he could see the answer in her hollow cheeks and tired eyes. "Always," she admitted. "Come on," David said, standing up. "There's a diner a few blocks from here. Let me buy you some breakfast. You and the little one." Amy looked suspicious, and David understood that too. She was probably thinking about all the times people had offered help with strings attached, all the times kindness had been a trap. "I'm not trying anything," he said gently. "I was where you are 6 months ago. Someone helped me and now I want to help you. That's all. Just breakfast and maybe some conversation." Something in his voice or his eyes must have convinced her because she slowly stood up, holding her baby and folding up her sign. They walked together to Jerry's diner, the same place where Keanu had taken David. It felt right coming full circle to this spot. The same waitress was working, and she recognized David immediately. He'd become a regular over the past months, often stopping in for coffee before work. She smiled and led them to a booth, bringing a high chair for the baby without being asked. David ordered big: pancakes, eggs, bacon, toast, orange juice. He told Amy to get whatever she wanted, not to hold back. While they waited for the food, Amy told him her story. It was different from his, but similar in all the important ways. A bad relationship, no family support, lost her job when she got pregnant, couldn't afford childcare, couldn't get hired without childcare, the impossible cycle of poverty that trapped so many people. The baby, a little girl named Hope, was 8 months old. Amy's eyes lit up when she talked about her daughter, despite everything. "I'm trying so hard to give her a better life," she said, tears in her eyes. "But I don't know how. Every door seems closed." David listened, really listened, the way Keanu had listened to him. And when the food came, he let her eat without hovering or making her feel rushed. He held little Hope while Amy ate her first real meal in days, and the baby looked up at him with big, curious eyes. After breakfast, David pulled out his wallet. He'd been saving for this, planning for this. He took out $300 in cash and put it on the table along with a piece of paper. "This is for you," he said. "To get cleaned up, get some supplies for the baby, maybe get a room for a few days so you can rest and think clearly." Amy stared at the money like it might disappear. "I can't take this." "Yes, you can," David said firmly but kindly. "Because someone did the same thing for me 6 months ago. And here's the other part." He pushed the paper toward her. "This is the number for a woman named Linda. She runs a program that helps single mothers. They can help with housing, job training, childcare, all of it. Call her. Tell her David sent you. She's expecting your call." He'd spent the last week setting this up, calling around, finding resources, making sure Amy wouldn't just get money, but real, sustainable help. The kind of help that could change her life the way his had been changed. "Why are you doing this?" Amy asked, tears streaming down her face. David smiled, thinking of Keanu. "Because someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Because kindness matters. Because we're supposed to help each other. And because when you get back on your feet, and you will, I want you to do the same thing for someone else. That's how we change the world. One person at a time." Amy was crying openly now, holding her baby and the money and the paper with the phone number. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." David paid the bill and stood up to leave. As he walked out of the diner into the bright morning sunshine, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not just hope or gratitude, but purpose. Real, genuine purpose. He thought about Keanu wherever he was in the world and silently thanked him again. That one act of kindness, that one decision to see David as a human being worth helping, had created a ripple effect. David was back on his feet. Amy would get help, and someday Amy would help someone else, and on it would go. David walked home through his neighborhood, noticing things he'd missed before. The man struggling with groceries who could use a hand. The elderly woman who looked lonely sitting on her porch. The kid who looked like he could use a mentor. So many people, so many opportunities to help. He'd spent months feeling worthless, invisible, like a burden on society. But now he understood something profound. Everyone has value. Everyone deserves dignity. And everyone has the power to make someone else's life a little better. That night, David sat in his small apartment, a place that felt like a palace compared to where he'd been. He thought about writing a letter to Keanu, trying one more time to express his gratitude. But instead, he just sat quietly, feeling grateful. The best way to thank the person who saved your life wasn't with words. It was with actions. It was by becoming the kind of person who saves someone else. It was by passing on the gift you'd been given. And that's exactly what David planned to spend the rest of his life doing.